Hello again, I'm Robert Fithen. Well, here we are again, counting down, ranking 140 albums from 1991. And don't forget, I revealed last video that I do have a small batch of albums that I would consider unrankable for one reason or another, and that is still to come in a future video. Like I said, I think there's about 7 or 8 of them. Just could not find a place to rank them. They just did not fit in the ranking for one reason or another, and I will explain all of that individually. But right now, we are up to number 52. Can you believe it? So if you made it this far in the video series, I just want to kind of tell you some of the things that are not included, so don't be expecting these to come up. For these 1991 albums, I'm only doing studio albums. I'm not doing compilations, no best ofs. No Anthrax, Attack of the B-Sides, no Stevie Ray Vaughan, The Sky is Crying. That's a posthumous album compiled of tracks from earlier sessions, so it's not really a studio album, even though it is studio recording. So I'm not doing anything like that. All full-length albums, no EPs, no extended plays, so no Ugly Kid Joe, As Ugly as They Want to Be. No live albums either. So that's so I didn't want to throw all that in there and mix that all in there because it's not really fair to put best ofs and things like that, rank those with these albums. So all studio albums. This is definitely not an EP. This is about 8 seconds short of the maximum amount of you could put on a CD at this time, I believe. Red Hot Chili Peppers and Blood Sugar Sex Magic. This is the one that broke them way into the mainstream, blew them up and made them superstars, especially the song Under the Bridge. Also, Give It Away is on here. 2 completely different ends of the spectrum as far as the music on this album is concerned. A lot of the funk rock. I'm not a really big fan of the funk rock mix. I like rock, I like funk, not necessarily mixed together. They do it better than most, I will say. I'd rather hear Red Hot Chili Peppers than like 24/7 Spies or Mind Funk or something like that. But yeah, those bands that have Infectious Grooves or whatever, those bands have pretty much, kind of blown by. But yeah, this thing just goes on and on and on. Like I said, 73 minutes and 52 seconds or something like that. Of course, it includes the big hits. My favorite on here, though, has always been Breaking the Girl. I do like this album more when they are doing more kind of, I guess you'd call it straightforward songs like Breaking the Girl. I'm not a big fan of the rappy kind of funk stuff. I don't like the very first track that much, the Power, the Wicked, or whatever that is. It's hard to read these on here. But, yeah, Sir Psycho Sexy, the big 8-minute thing at the end where they try to be funkadelic and they just get nastier and nastier. You can keep that. Give It Away is actually okay, but probably just because I had that drilled into my head playing that over and over again on the radio all these years. But, yeah, Funky Monks is kind of a little bit of filler in there. So you got some filler, you got some rapping, you got some funk rock, and you got some straightforward songs. And like I said, the more straightforward ones are my favorites on here. But, you can't argue with the success of this thing. This thing blew them, like I said, blew them into the stratosphere and blew them up. I liked them kind of before that a little bit. I really liked the Knock Me Down song that they had on Mother's Milk album. Wasn't a big fan of their Stevie Wonder cover, Higher Ground. I would definitely prefer the Stevie Wonder version of that. But they kind of ever hit or miss to me. I mean, after this, they had a few here and there kind of cool tracks, mostly not. They had that, One Hot Minute. That was kind of hit and miss when you listen to that all the way through. I probably just need a decent Red Hot Chili Peppers compilation, to be honest. I don't even know if one came out or not, but... this is one of those albums that was released the day before my birthday in 1991, September 24th. And I'll talk about this more later, but when you look at that date and the albums that came out just on that date in 1991, it's like, wow, incredible. But yeah, I think a lot of people would probably rank this a lot higher on their list. This would probably be a lot of people's top 10. So this ranking of 140 albums from 1991 continues with Throwing Muses and their album The Real Ramona. Not to be confused with that fake Ramona that's been going around. This is The Real Ramona. Don't get it twisted. This is Throwing Muses. They are Kristen Hirsch and Tanya Donnelly mainly teaming up for some great sort of pop rock, alt rock even. They get a little heavy in places. They get a little light in places. It's a great varied listen. throughout. And one of the things I really appreciate, not only about this album, but a lot of the albums from 1991, one of the reasons I chose to do this year is because this is before a lot of the drum tracks come in the box production comes in, the fake stuff. They're a real band playing real music, and that's one of the things I love about Throwing Muses and a lot of these bands that are on the 1999 or 1991 ranking. And this one starts off pretty strong with the counting backwards. Stellar way to start this album. You've got, again, a real band playing really well, and two great front women, leading the whole thing there. I like the beginning of this album. I really like more towards the end. It's the middle where it's one of these type of things. It gets in the middle with tracks like Golden Thing, and there's a couple others where Golden Thing, first of all, has this kind of Bo Diddley kind of I Want Candy kind of thing going on. There's always got to be one of those songs in there, that kind of riff. But they adopt this sort of twang when they're singing with the middle couple of songs there. Not my favorite things on the album, hey there, golden thing, when you get there, better kiss me. Bing. No. Not into it. They do have some nice instrumentals, very short instrumentals to kind of cleanse the listening palate and get ready for good stuff towards the end, like Not Too Soon. And Hole in Her Head's a great longer, definitely an alt-rock thing going on there, but Not Too Soon is definitely the highlight for me. The Tanya Donelly songs, basically, are the ones you want to... Those are the best. It's like check for the Union label, check for the Tanya Donelly writing credit. Those are the ones you want to listen to. And the first couple as well. But yeah, those are the great ones, including the final track where it kind of slows down, and that's a great one too, called Two Steps. So definitely check that out as well. Check out the whole album. You might like the twangy stuff. I just don't like that type of vocal. Yeah, Throwing Muses and the real Ramona. It had been a long time since I've heard Throwing Muses, so good to have this excuse in this countdown ranking thing to get reacquainted with that band in this particular album. 1991 was the year that Slowdive came out with their debut called Just for a Day. Now, 1991 in the UK. This was not released in the US until 1992. But it was the same exact configuration, same mixes and everything, same album. But yeah, so it was out in 91, so I'm making it a part of the ranking here, even though it was not out in this particular country. But yeah, that great, just kind of dream pop it was called at the time. It's called shoegaze now. But it was dream pop then, and dream is what this is a great thing to have on the headphones and when, you just want to drift off to sleep, which is exactly what I did around track 4. Not to say it's sleepy or anything like that or boring. It's not. It's just great music to have on at like 1 o'clock in the morning. You're trying to drift off into sleep, and this is great music to do it to. It's nothing. There's an instrumental on here. It's funny. There's only one instrumental, but I didn't even realize it was an instrumental until it was already over, and I'm looking at the track listing, and this one's an instrumental. It's like the vocals are so mixed in with the music. It's just that kind of a thing where it's more of a sound. I can't really pick out like, oh my God, this track is killer, skip over this one or whatever. It's all about just listening to the full album and just kind of, that kind of thing. Catch the Breeze was the single, but it's really more about the entire experience of the album. Like I said, you put this on and 3 songs have gone by and you don't even realize it. It's just that kind of a thing. Not the kind of thing you want to put like one track in a playlist, unless you've got a playlist of, dream pop that's just like this. But yeah, or shoegaze. Speaking of gazing, if you gaze long enough at whatever that is on the, whatever that album cover is, on the top near the right there, that will start to turn into like a demonic looking Bart Simpson, if you look at that long enough. Fishbone and the Reality of My Surroundings was their second album from 1991, 1991, just like all these albums. And if you wanted to hear what Funkadelic might have sounded like if they would have continued into the 90s, it might have sounded a little something like this. Just outrageous craziness, just cranked up. It's got that really high, everything's pushed way up, compressed sound that would take over music in the late 90s and make everything sound completely annoying on CD, but I think it actually suits this album a lot more. So it kind of works for Fishbone to have that sort of processing. And who's to blame or who's to bless for that sound, we don't know, because Fishbone, this is self-produced. David Kanye did like a couple of tracks, and then there's 14 assistant engineers. So a lot of chefs in the kitchen on this one, and it definitely sounds like they're just throwing in everything from all directions. It is a lot. Sometimes it's chaos, but it all seems to work. It's a lot of fun. If you like Red Hot Chili Peppers, but you want it cranked all the way up and you want the crazy turned up a little bit, you need to check out Fishbone for the real thing. Yeah, the Reality of My Surroundings is the album, and you know, it's a very long album. It's another one of those like 65-minute, 70. I'm not sure how long it is. It's got 14 tracks on it. Now some of them are like more like interludes, but some great tunes on here. It ends with the big single Sunless Saturday, which is a great way to wrap things up with something just a little more conventional sounding as you float off into your next album or your next adventure or whatever you're going to do. They kind of let you down easy. But great song. They do get quite nasty on the Nasty Man song. It reminded me again like of Funkadelic when they get way out. They also do that on Prayer for the Junkie Maker, which gets really explicit, almost too much. It's almost too harsh, but I guess they've got a point they want to make about drugs, and they certainly get that point across on that song. So all kinds of different things they're singing about, all kinds of different sounds. It's quite an adventure. Some of it works more than other things, I think. I don't think the interludes work that much. If I were a ellipsis, that comes up 3 or 4 times, and you know, it's just kind of there. But it's fast, it's punky, it's way out. It's R&B. At times. It's just a lot of things thrown in, and for a great mix overall. Like I said, some things work better than others, but overall, great mix of sounds with Fishbone. And we are at a point in the ranking where it's time to talk about Screaming Trees, and the album they had out in 1991 was called Uncle Anesthesia. And I first found out about Screaming Trees with the single soundtrack and that awesome song Nearly Lost You, and then I got the album that is on, discovered a lot of their other, you know, tracks on there, Dollar Bill and, you know, a few others as well. Love some of the Mark Lanegan solo stuff. Whiskey for the Holy Ghost was one of my favorite albums that came out. I think that was 94 that came out. That's great late night listening. This is pretty much in the Screaming Trees grunge, you know, tradition. Some of the swirling guitars in some of the tracks, some of the just basic rock stuff, but a great listen either way. Starts out with Beyond the Horizon. That's a great way to start this off. Nice, just straightforward grunge rock tune. Mark Lanegan's vocals, instantly recognizable if you know who he is. This is total Screaming Trees here with him on the lead vocals, and so that's a nice touch. A lot of great music in here with some slight differentiation. It's not completely, you know, like some journey into diversity with the sound and this and that and this over here, and they're trying that and they're throwing this in. It's pretty much, you know, a solid, you know, typical sound all the way through, but there are little flourishes here. Something About Today kind of has a more of a garage rock type of feel, so that's pretty cool to show up like about halfway through. You get the song Disappear that actually adds some horns into the mix, kind of a dreamy song there towards the end, but the horns are not aggravating. So their horns are used nicely. Usually I don't like when the horns come in, but they do it right on that track. So yeah, great stuff on here. Screaming Trees always been kind of an under the radar kind of grunge band. You know, they never got the exposure that bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and all those. Not even Mudhoney. I don't even think they're on that level as far as popularity. But not to be missed, especially if you're into that kind of music and you only heard a couple of tracks, like maybe you had the single soundtrack and only heard Nearly Lost You. Definitely check out some of their other stuff, especially that album, and then this one, Uncle Anesthesia. Always like Screaming Trees, and like I said, not a lot of diversity, not a lot of experimentation, but just a solid album all the way through. Okay, we're up to the self-titled album from Widespread Panic, which was actually their second album, and this thing is very long, 72 minutes long. It was one of those 1991 albums that just went for it and tried to fill up the entire CD. So a lot of stuff on here, a lot of music on here. It gives them room to do that, you know, 10-minute song thing if they want to. They are kind of considered jam band somewhat. They start off the album in great fashion with a cover of an early Van Morrison song, which I have not heard the Van Morrison version, but they do a great version of it, called Send Your Mind. That starts things off very lively, and you're just off and flying, and that's the way I like the Widespread Panic songs on here. They do have, it's kind of a mixed bag, this album. They do have a tendency to get a little jazzy at times, which I'm not a big fan of, and when the vocals go a little spiritual, I don't think they pull that off as well as they do just the really smoking stuff, like the very end of the song Love Tractor. That thing smokes, but then it goes right into this song called Weight of the World that starts off sounding like a game show theme or something with its jazzy horns and stuff like that. So this album is kind of uneven, but I think it succeeds more than it doesn't. So, I mean, I think if they would have just removed a couple of tracks, like maybe the song called Rock, you know, some of the jazzier stuff, this would have been a really tight, just, you know, hard album to beat. But I did really enjoy a lot of it, and makes me want to hear some more Widespread Panic. I haven't heard these guys in so long. I used to, you know, hear them every once in a while. I had some friends that were into Widespread Panic. I'm not really sure what albums they were, but, you know, you'd hear them on every once in a while. They never really got on radio big time, so I never played them on the radio, so I'm not really familiar with, you know, a lot of their music to where I can actually call out a song title and go, that's what that is. But I know I've kind of heard them, you know, kind of blowing in the wind over the years. And, yeah, it was nice to get reacquainted, and I think I need to hear some more from these guys. But this one was like I said, a little uneven, but it definitely had major highlights. So it is 1991 that we're talking about. So in my collection, I'm not showing or talking about a lot of vinyl. I mean, I think out of all of these, I have 3 records that I'm showing and 1 cassette. And but I will talk about Divinyls on CD. This is their self-titled release, but it's not their first album. I think this is like their 3rd or 4th album. From Australia, from Sydney, and it's basically a duo. You've got Chrissy Amphlett and a guy, and then they have all these other musicians going around. I think they were a couple for a while, actually, the Chrissy and the man here, but I'm not sure what his name is. There's the CD, and there they both are. But yeah, Chrissy Amphlett with the bangs, not Chrissy Hine. That's the wrong band. Those are the wrong Banes. This is Chrissy Amphlett. But if you know the Divinyls and you're in the U.S., you probably know them pretty much for one song, and that song is on here. It's I Touch Myself. I love that song. I love it. The first time I heard it, I'm like, this is what we need more of right here. It is so just like unapologetic. It doesn't sound like she's putting you on. It doesn't sound like she's trying to be provocative and she's going to put it out there and she's going to be aggressive about it. And what she just sounds so matter of fact about it. It's such a smooth delivery. Like, I love the part where the song breaks down and she's talking and she's like, and when I think about you, I touch myself. Ooh. What a great song. I wish the rest of the songs on here were that good. Now, they don't overdo it by making every song about, you know, masturbating or sex or whatever. There is a few other, you know, nice tunes on here, but overall it's a pretty mid-level affair here with the Divinyls. It's good music, but, you know, where can you go after I Touch Myself? I do remember they had a song that played on the radio, at least here in the St. Louis market, from the earlier album, I guess. It was called Pleasure and Pain. It's a fine line between pleasure and pain. You did it once, you can do it again, and whenever you come, don't try to explain. It's a fine, fine line between pleasure and pain. I mean, that song only played a few times, and I still remember the lyrics or the chorus just like that. But as far as the songs on here, Make Out All Right, I think, was another single. That's pretty good. That actually starts the album. Then you go into I Touch Myself, and you know, I don't remember a lot of these until I heard this again, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember that. Yeah, Love School, maybe, you know, I think that might have been another single, but none of them really stand out like I Touch Myself. So, you know, if you want that song, maybe get the single or find it on a compilation, but if you really want to deep dive into Divinyls, I don't think this is going to disappoint. It's just not going to blow you away or anything, but I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a nice album. It always made me want to check out some of their earlier stuff, which I remember getting another one of their albums on like vinyl, Divinyls on vinyl. I think it was like their second one. I don't remember what it was. It didn't have Pleasure and Pain on it, whatever it was. And I got it home. I bought it at a record convention, you know, so I'm, you know, around a bunch of records or whatever. I got it home and it absolutely stank. I'm not talking about the song quality or the sound quality. I'm talking about it literally, I'm talking about like olfactory zones here. It actually stank. It was like mold coming out of and I opened it up and looked, and it's just got black mold all on the inner side. And I just took that thing and just went and threw it away. So hopefully I will be able to get some more Divinyls here. But I always, you know, they're always not exactly right on the front of the radar, but you know, maybe they should be. 140 albums from the year 1991, and now it's time to talk about some just full-on synth pop, and it doesn't pretend to be anything else. That is Erasure, or some people say Erasure. Anyway, the album is called Chorus. I've heard them called Erasure by several people over the years. It's Erasure, right? Like a SH and not a J? Anyway. So yeah, you've got the two guys there. You got the guy from Yaz. What's his name? You got Andy Bell on the vocals. And I don't know that much about this band, or this duo, I should say. But yeah, this is catchy stuff. The first song, especially the chorus, is extremely immediate and extremely catchy. And the song is called Chorus. So, you know, that makes sense. But you get a lot of that in this album. I think Andy Bell's voice just really blends well with this sort of electronic synth stuff. And it has sort of a warmer sound than a lot of what else was going on at this time. And I found out that Vince Clarke is actually using analog synths in this. So I don't know if that's the reason he wanted a warmer sound, or wanted put a little heart in there and not so much just cold zeros and ones, or what's going on with that. But yeah, you can definitely tell, or at least I can, that this is a little bit of a throwback sound as far as the production of it. But yeah, great. A lot of catchy stuff. Synth pop is not my favorite format or genre, not my favorite sound, but if you're going to do it, you might as well do it with the pros and some of the best, and that's why these guys are. You can hear this album, and you know, I think, like I said, I think Andy Bell's vocals, the heart that he puts into it, and it really it kind of counters the coldness of the synths. So it's a great matchup, and this is probably one of their better albums. Like I said, I'm not a big into Erasure albums. I don't even know if I've actually heard more than 2 all the way through, and this is one of them. And if for some reason you're a big Erasure fan and have never heard this, you probably should check it out. If you like synth pop and you want a full album experience, check it out, because a lot of the times this kind of thing plays better on like 12-inch singles and things like that. But if you're not into beeps and drum tracks and stuff like that, you probably want to definitely steer clear of this. Okay, so up next is the band from Sydney, Australia, Hoodoo Gurus. Their 1991 album was called Kinky, and it starts off with just a hard rock basher called Head in the Sand. Dave Faulkner's like big, you know, vocals. He's got that kind of like, you know, voice like this that really just cuts through all of the hard rock and all of the instruments. So that's well suited for Hoodoo Gurus. But you know, not all of it's bashing away hard rock. There's like mid-level pop rock moments on here, like the single 1,000 Miles Away, kind of a sentimental part of the album. And you got the fun kind of retro psychedelic silliness of Miss Summer of Love 69. You know, and I'm sure the 69 is just the year, nothing more, the way that song goes. But yeah, just partying tunes throughout, just like I said, everything from hard bashing rock to kind of more of like a rock pop thing. Probably the kind of thing that'll sound great flying down the highway, maybe on your way through the outback to Perth or something like that from Sydney, but or you know, in the United States, as it were. But these guys always kind of flew under the radar in the U.S. I don't think they ever really you know, broke through with anything, you know, big hits or anything like that. The people who know here just kind of know, you know. I have a couple of their albums. I probably should get a couple more, and if I do, I would probably make the album Kinky one of those. There's some nice, you're just your basic, you know, rock pop band that definitely leans way on the rock side on a couple of the tunes, and sounds pretty good. Not a lot of, and sounds pretty good. Not a lot of the early 90s nonsense. I did a whole 3-part video on Australian rock, And that is one of the things I love about Australian rock music right around this time, is they don't have any of that 90s nonsense that comes with a lot of the American stuff, that especially comes later on with the more of like the rock pop stuff, where you start getting the drum machines and you start getting this, the guitar squealing kind of stuff, and the horse neighing guitars at the end of the 80s and all that. Hardly any of that stuff is in Australian rock, and Hoodoo Gurus definitely one of the ones leading the pack on that. You know, one of the great things about doing this whole project, of doing this incredible deep dive into 1991, hearing albums I have not heard in 25 years, hearing albums that, you know, I thought were going to be awful and were, hearing just all of these different, you know, hearing big albums that, you know, I've heard all the time, you know, and then hearing albums like this one that I didn't even remember existed. It was kind of critically panned. I wasn't expecting much, but I thought, hey, you know what? It's Pat Benatar. I'll give it a listen. And really surprised by. That's one of the great things about doing this, is being surprised by albums. And this one, True Love from Pat Benatar, was a surprise. I didn't know I was going to enjoy this as much as I did. Again, the critics were not nice to this from what I remember, because I didn't remember this album at all, and then it starts playing, and I'm like, okay, I think I remember this. I think people didn't like this. It didn't do anything. It didn't go anywhere. It was kind of like a passion project for Pat Benatar, just something that she wanted to do. She does it really, really well, though. What it is, it's a complete turn from what she'd been doing. She's obviously not trying to get on hard rock radio with this or anything like that. She's doing, like, jump blues and, like, sort of like smoky lounge blues. It's all kind of energetic. It's all upbeat. It's none of this like there are some kind of torch songs on here, but they're still done with a lot of energy. Pretty intense stuff. It does have a lot of, you know, the big horns and big horn sections or whatever, because it is the jump blues type thing. But it's done in the correct element. I usually don't like horn sections and whatever, especially when they try to put them into rock songs, or I'm not big into jazz or whatever, but I do love the blues. I love jump blues, and she does a really, really fantastic job with this. If you're a fan of Pat Benatar, you have not heard this album, first of all, know what it is going in. Don't expect, you know, In the Heat of the Night or Crimes of Passion or something like that. Know what it is going in, and I think you will actually like this. Don't listen to the reviews that came out, because a lot of them are like mediocre. It's like, it's all right or whatever. But I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I did not expect that at all. Usually when artists doing like, you know, entire albums based on a musical genre that they're not used to, and it's bluesy stuff or it's jazzy stuff or it's whatever, usually I'm just like, yeah, no thanks. And then sometimes I will hear them and just be like, yeah, called that one. It's not very good. This is great, though. I did not expect this at all. And the very first song, I always love the Wynonie Harris version of Bloodshot Eyes, one of my favorite songs from the 50s. And she does a terrific job opening the album with that, and that pretty much sets the tone. And so I do wish her vocals were a little higher in the mix, though. Some of the music seems to drown her out, and she's got that incredible Pat Benatar voice, so I don't understand why she's kind of mixed down a little bit. But other than that, this sounds fantastic. Again, wish she was up a little bit in the mix. But I think if you're into Pat Benatar, you like lively music, kind of a throwback thing, you like concept albums like this, something tells me you will thoroughly enjoy it. I think they made a mistake by calling it True Love, because True Love to me sounds like it's going to be ballads and love songs and whatever. That's a mistake. You've got cover songs in here, of course. She's doing a lot of the, you know, like I said, Wynonie Harris and B.B. King and stuff like that. But they also bring in their own stuff as well, and it mixes in really great. I mean, it's a great mix of, you know, the originals and then covers. So check it out, Pat Benatar and True Love. Nice. So in ranking these 140 albums from 1991, I've mentioned before, I'm not really including live albums. It's just studio albums. No compilations, no EPs, no posthumous albums like The Sky is Crying, none of that. It's just studio albums that were produced in either 1990 or 1991 and then released in 1991. And but I do have this one. It's not really an exception because it is partial studio, but it's also partial live. It's one of those hybrid type albums. and it is from Hawkwind. And I could not pass up the opportunity to check out a Hawkwind album that I'd actually never heard before. And in 1991, they did come out with one called Palace Springs, partially studio, partially recorded live in Los Angeles in 1989. It does include some of the classics that you've heard on previous albums here done live. It also includes a live track that isn't on another album called Acid Test, or wasn't previously on an album. That one, Can You Be There, gets repeated a lot. So that's the gist of that song. But, it's got this pulsating rhythm through a lot of the songs. You get in that Hawkwind kind of, mood where you just feel like you're just floating in space, but it is 1991. And so you do have a little more of a subdued kind of sound. It doesn't have the great pan stuff where, stuff flying out of all the speakers, and, it doesn't have that kind of raw early 70s sound on some of their great albums, Fa Sol La Mi Do, great stuff like that from Hawkwind. You still have that Hawkwind sound. I mean, as soon as I put this on, I immediately recognized Dave Brock's vocals. He's been the constant through all the Hawkwind albums. And it still sounds great. It's a little polite sounding, I guess, for them. It is, they're kind of aged at this point. It is, like I said, it is 1991. And then half this album, or actually more than half of this album, is live. You do get things like Destination Alley, which in this version contains really late 80s synthy keyboards. So you definitely don't hear that in the earlier Hawkwind albums. But the two studio tracks are fine. Especially considering they're later in their career. The first one, Back in the Box, starts off sounding kind of like Rockin' in the Free World from Neil Young. I thought that was interesting. But a decent Hawkwind album. If you're a big Hawkwind fan like I am, and you just never got around to hearing stuff that came out this late, check this out. You get kind of the best of both worlds. You get a couple of new tracks that are definitely in the Hawkwind vein. And you also get some classics done live here, and a couple of tracks that are not on any other album that are live. So, you get kind of a mixed bag in this Hawkwind album, Palace Springs. But definitely an interesting listen, and I'm glad this is one of the reasons I wanted to do 1991 and a whole year where you go really deep in 140 albums, because you just going through the usual album rankings, or hey, I picked this up because it was reissued, or hey, I finally found my grail, or whatever. You miss these kind of under the radar albums like this one. So decent listen, and if I ever see this somewhere on CD, I will definitely pick this up. So I like a lot of Rush songs and albums, but I'm not a huge knocked out Rush fan by any stretch of the imagination. But in 1991 they put out the album Roll the Bones, and a few things I used to notice about this especially when it was first out, and then I've heard it a few more times over the years. On the radio we played a couple of tracks on it, like Dreamtime and the title track, and Ghost of a Chance, which I think is excellent. The Ghost of a Chance is probably my favorite song on the whole thing. But I noticed that the big thing for me is Neil Peart's drumming on this. And around this era as a whole, not just this album, but it becomes really kind of pedestrian. It becomes really kind of basic timekeeping. I read in an interview and saw a couple interviews with him where he talks about how he changed his drumming style because of some jazz drummer or something influenced him to drum a different way, and it's not like anything like he used to do. He used to be all over the place and do this incredible drumming like in the 80s or earlier 80s and late 70s, and just be use every, have this huge drum kit, use every drum, and was just all over the place. And it really made him stand out. On this one, it's more just like your basic drumming, and there's little flourishes, obviously. He's still an excellent drummer, but it's really kind of, he kind of toned it way down. And that's the big thing that I noticed with Rush albums like Roll the Bones. But yeah, Ghost of a Chance, great lyrics on that. Still got the incredible lyrics throughout, except for the actual title track. I never was a fan of the song Roll the Bones. Why does it happen? Because it happens. Roll the bones. That's no. It doesn't happen just because it happens. It happens because some asshole made it happen. You see something bad happening, you can trace it back to somebody or a group of people. It just didn't happen. The person that just oh, well, shit happens, that's the motherfucker that did it right there, guaranteed. 99% of the time, that's the one. The dude that says that, the woman that says that, they're responsible. Shit just doesn't happen. No, you don't just roll the bones. But anyway, never liked that song. I think one of the better tracks on here is actually the instrumental, Where's My Thing? It's another great one where there is no vocals or lyrics or anything. It's a great instrument. They actually start to let the music shine a little bit. I wish they would do that more with the songs that actually have words throughout the album. But, you know, it's still a Rush album. It's still it's still great. It's still good, you know, but it's not up to the standard of a lot of their earlier stuff. Oh, and it does have the part where I believe it is Neil Peart, or maybe it's Geddy Lee. I don't know who it is, but they're rapping in this. And doesn't need to be rapping on a Rush album, unless it's rapping, like Christmas rapping, and you're getting it as a gift. Back to the UK with an album from Billy Bragg called Don't Try This at Home. Billy Bragg was a name that I used to see all the time when reading, you know, the rock magazines and the college magazines, and I didn't really know, you know, that much about him other than he was very political. That's what I always heard. So this is one of those CDs that I went out and bought just based on, oh, this is this Billy Bragg guy. I'm going to see what he's about. Now, you got to remember, this is 1991. So there's no internet. You know, you're not going to click on something and sample it. You're going to go buy the CD, and hopefully it's great based on everything you've read. And it's definitely sort of an emotional roller coaster on this thing. Starts off really strong, really pop, really upbeat, you know, accidents waiting to happen. That's pretty cool. A couple more tunes, and then it goes right into this really, really gut-wrenching, sad song. You know, it's a song about war called Everywhere, and really just gives you a perspective of these two friends, and they end up on the opposite sides, and just kind of the experience. I don't know, I'm sure maybe Billy Bragg was never in a war, but he writes as if, you know, sort of like a Motorhead song that I'll be talking about much later in the ranking, but just given this whole, like, really sad, it's just a sad war story called Everywhere. You'll just have to check that out. But yeah, that's, you know, it's shoo, shoo, shoo. Then we get a fun little country tinge song called You Woke Up My Neighborhood. We're back upbeat again. And then we get this another, like, wow, song called Trust. I don't know if he is singing from the perspective of what's supposed to be a gay guy or from a woman, but somebody's inside him, and he's pretty much freaked out about it. And are we going to be together now? Or are you just going to crumble on the floor? What did you do to me? You went inside of me. That is the song Trust. Later on, a song called Sexuality. And that definitely is about a gay guy and how we all just can't get along. You know, this is 1991. So this is really bold song for the time. And for some reason, the record label decided to make it the single. Well, that wasn't going to become a hit in the United States, and it didn't. But great song nonetheless, Sexuality, about how, you know, your sexuality doesn't matter. We can all get along. We can all be friends. We all have things in common. We all can live together as one. I think something like that, you know, if you're younger, might seem like, well, of course we can. But back in 1991, that was a bold statement, believe it or not. And so a great song from Billy Bragg. I really like this CD a lot. I really like the album a lot. I really like a lot of the different themes and the different places he goes in it. The one thing I will say, though, is I do like the more fully realized songs with the instruments and the band and the drums and the melodies and whatever, more than I like the softer, just him and the sparse arrangement, just him and the piano or whatever's going on. I don't think that his voice is captivating enough, or he's got the pipes, man. He doesn't to pull off stuff like that. So I do like it when he is backed by a full band more than I like the softer kind of stuff. I don't think he's as well. That's as well suited for him. But you know, it's got a lot of tracks on it, so you can skip over a few and still have a full album experience. So yeah, that's why it's higher up here. And it was one of those times when I just bought something because I'd read about the guy a lot. And I'm going to get a Billy Bragg CD, and I did. So glad I got that all those years ago. This is one of the ones where I did not have to wait until college, a couple of years later, to find out about it. I just took a chance in 1991 and had this when it was first out. So this video ends at number 40 of 140 albums ranked from the year 1991. Thank you so much if you've been checking out all these videos. You've made it through 100 different albums and me just going on and on about each one of them. So I definitely appreciate you watching these videos. It was quite a bit of effort putting this together, listening to all of these albums, some of them multiple times, and talking about them, editing the videos, all of that. and I definitely appreciate you putting in the time checking these out and hopefully commenting on some of the videos as well. Have I already talked about your favorite album and put it lower than you hoped? Maybe it's still to come. Hopefully it's still to come. Maybe your favorite album is my favorite album. There's a good chance of that happening, actually. So thank you so much. Hopefully you will continue with me on this journey, but I definitely appreciate it. Once again, I'm Robert Fithen, and hopefully I will talk to you again soon.